Awesome. Well, before we get too far into this, I want to do a special shout out for DevNexus 2021. I want to just thank our volunteers, Ari, who was there, Monica and Cal. They jumped in at the last minute to be track monitors. So, folks, thank you for that. I want to also thank board of directors, Pratik and Vincent, for all the hard work they did getting LeVar Burton in. Putting all that stuff together. They really did step up. I want to also thank Roy and Caitlin for doing all the all the IT work that it took to keep this things going. Vinny Burke, Vinny for doing all the work it took to get the training going. Burke for doing a talk, and I think did some managing of tracks. I hope I got everybody. They did a marvelous job, folks. We're looking forward to doing DevNexus 2022 in April next year, and we're going to be shooting for in person, so hopefully we'll have a chance to have kind of a reunion. With that being said, let's get started. And so today we are, who am I? Well, I am Glenn Renfro. As you can figure out, I'm on the board of AJUG as well, but I'm a VMware engineer. I work on Spring Cloud tasks, Spring Cloud data flow, as well as make sure I got this going here so I can chat with folks if they need me. There we go. And Spring Batch. So you see that I have this kind of ephemeral viewpoint when it comes to the world, meaning I work on apps that typically start, do something, and terminate. They don't stay persistent like a LRP or a long-running process. So when I was looking at a lot of the questions I was getting from folks out in the community, some of the questions were about restarting. What happens if an app fails? What do we do? And so we kind of chatted about that. And so with that being said, I said, is there a way in which we can is there some patterns or some tools that we can use out there that's free and available so that we can maybe have our apps to, be a little bit more, I say our apps, but create the processes to, instead of when a batch fails and me getting a call in the middle of the night or a NOC team have to handle it, that an automated service can actually try to attempt to do the cleanup or the repair and then restart that batch job. So if you will, automate that restarting process for a batch job. Now we know that like if you're using Kubernetes by default and I'm running a job, if a job fails, by default, it's going to retry. When I mean fails, returns a non-zero value. It's going to try forever. We could configure it to say, hey, don't do that. We can say never for, I think it's restartability. If you say never, okay, it won't start regardless of the exit code. But that is kind of brute force. I want to see if there's a more elegant way in which we can handle this. So with that going forward here, there we go. First thing I need to say is, as everybody realizes, this is a batch. This is going to be talking about batch apps. And I know you're kind of saying, oh, Glenn, this is great. This is yesterday's technology today. So I want to spend this one slide to get it out of your system, right? Good stretch. It's okay, because batch can be fun. All right, well, maybe I have a strange definition of fun, okay? But my point is that we have so many solutions out there for the problems that we need to solve, right? We have long-running processes, the traditional web application. We also have serverless, so that we can take advantage of functions to help solve some of our problems. We have event processing, or what we call streaming. So in that case, handle events as they come in. So that's one set. But then there's this other set out there that we can look at and say, we're going to need to read in a bunch of data, process it, and then write out results. And we want this to run at a specific time. We don't want this app to stay present. We don't want it to consume resources. We don't want it to consume cost, and in a way also help out the environment, right? So we want this app to start, do its job, and terminate. So anytime as we go through this conversation, we're going to be talking about batch today. But if you start kind of get the yawners, remember, happy cat, okay? It is a good solution. Or I should say, it's a good solution depending on the problem, right? So let's talk about the scenario. Let's say that, many times we have batch jobs that can be kicked off based on a schedule or an event. Something occurs, it launches, does its work. But in this case, we're going to kind of go with a scheduled batch job, something that launches at, let's say, midnight. And in this case, it's going to be a bill run. This bill run's going to start at midnight. It's going to run about 4 hours and then terminate. But what happens after maybe 2 hours? It explodes. What do we do in this case? Do we want to restart it and hope it works? Do we want the NOC team to have to go through instructions to go through and see if what they're supposed to do before they call you? Do we wait till the next morning to see that it failed? What can we do about that? So in this demo that we're going to be talking about today and showing, we're going to have a 3-step billing process here. We're going to prepare some records. We're going to calculate the bill. We're going to record that. And then finally, we're going to send out the bill. So it's very simple, 3 steps. But to make it interesting, we're going to write our code so it's going to fail at step 2 and do so in a controllable way. So that's something that we can easily fix tonight, right? So what we're going to do is obtain records. We're going to start calculating the bills, and then it's going to fail. But then what do we do then? How can we, without going in manually and fixing it and resetting the run, how can we maybe automate that process? So what actions do we want to take? For the application, we want our application to do something. We want it to notify us that it did fail. Now that could be a log. I could have something like Tanzu visibility or Datadog that can be monitoring my app and then saying, hey, there's a problem here. I can certainly have it maybe store its state in a database. I might have it even emit an event to like a messaging framework, for example, Kafka or Rabbit, basically AMQP. We could do any one of these things so that it can notify somebody that it terminated. Also, we want terminated, meaning did it terminate successfully? Did it terminate with a warning, or did it terminate with an error, meaning it failed? But do we also want to have it to do something as well? We want it to identify the cause. We want, it may not know exactly what happened, right? But it may know that hey, I tried to write to the table and there was some funky data. Maybe the table's missing. Maybe I ran out of file space. Maybe I ran out of table space. Something like that. It may be able to tell us that I had this error within this range. Then we also want our app to do something else. We want our app to pick up where it left off at, meaning we want it to be, if you will, that part of restartability. And what I mean by that part of restartability, meaning it ran for 2 hours, and during the second phase, it made it to record 5,000,001 successfully. And on 5,000,002, it failed. What we want to be able to do is at record 5,000,002, on the second run, pick up at record 5,000,002 and pick up and finish off that remaining 2 hours. So we don't want to lose that first 2 hours of effort that we've done. The other part is we want to have infrastructure that will capture that notification with that error and attempt to resolve the problem, right? And if it can resolve the problem, we want it to relaunch our app to start, and our app to, hey, pick up where it left off at. So we want notifications, we want information that's valuable from our app, we want it to pick up where it left off, and then we want to have the infrastructure to actually try to resolve and retry that batch application. So what do we want to do? Basically what I said, make the app restartable and then have a system to handle that problem. Should have known I had that slide there, right? Whoops. Well, in that case, what do I mean when I say that I want my app to be restartable? One, these 2 steps. So that's what we're going to cover first. Report the error and pick up where we left off at. You're saying, well, isn't that a lot of code? And the answer is not necessarily. Since I'm a Spring engineer, our solutions will be written in what? Spring and Spring Boot. Sorry, folks. That's the way it is. I should have worn my green shirt, right? Sorry. Actually, that's for tomorrow. I'm saving my spring shirt for tomorrow. St. Patty's Day. In that case, everything's being Spring Boot, and what we want to do is have our app to restartable. So instead of me writing that code, let me take advantage of a project that's out there. For those folks that have already know what Spring Batch is, take a break, have a sip of a soda, and just kind of passively listen for about the next 1 minute, because some folks haven't heard of it yet. In this case, Spring Batch allows me to write batch applications, and it simplifies that process. Along with simplifying that process, it gives us several tools to be able to do that. One, it gives me a framework or a scaffolding that I can build my batch app with, and it allows me to do that by creating a series of steps. And each of those steps are restartable. So I can actually write my app, use steps, and then have it run my app in those steps. And if one of the steps fails, it can pick up where that step failed and pick that up on the next launch of that application. It also provides me readers and writers. So commonly when we look at a step, what is a step? It's reading some data, processing that data, and then writing that result out. We want folks to focus on what? The business problem at hand, that process section. So in that case, what we want it to be able to do is the following, is we want it to go in and provide you readers and writers. So out of the box, Spring Batch provides JWC readers and writers, Mongo readers and writers, flat file reader and writers, Kafka reader writers, AMQP reader writers, and gosh, I've got all the whole list, but a bunch of those out there. And you can mix and match those together. So what I want to be able to do is write my process and just the methods that I need to process that data. And I might provide a JWC reader that writes to a Kafka writer and do the processing and filtering in between. So Spring Batch gives that to me out of the box. Also, it gives me transaction support. So what that means is I don't have to write the transaction code. I just can configure that via properties or via I can specify how I want to chunk the data in the code that I write. But in that case, I don't have to write code to do that. It's all property settings. I don't have to explicitly code to that. And like I said, it's restartable. The other part, the notification. Remember, we want our app to send notification, but also with that notification, we want it to be able to tell us what happened. Do I have to write code to do that? No. There's a project called Spring Cloud Task. And what Spring Cloud Task does is it says, hey, we're running our apps, and our apps could be anywhere in our local infrastructure. It could be on various virtual machines within our infrastructure. It could be in a cloud platform. It could be running in a Kubernetes instance. So I could be running one app and think about Kubernetes in one of many clusters, right? So what I want to be able to do is I want my ephemeral app, my batch app, if you will, to be a good citizen. And in that case, I want it to be able to record to a common location, whether it was successful or not. So if it was, if I'm running a cluster, if I'm running my batch app, and I'll call it my batch app for now, runs in cluster 1, and I want it to maybe record that data to one database. Or I may want it to actually write and post an event to like a Kafka or RabbitMQ. Spring Cloud Task provides that functionality for you without having to write that code. All you have to do is add the dependencies that you want. And in this case, I want to tell it, I want to have, I specified that I want it to write to Kafka and provide 2 dependencies there. We'll talk about that in a second. And then the Spring Cloud Task Starter, and I have to add 1 annotation. It will see that we have those dependencies, and it will begin emitting that data. If I want it to write those results to a database, I provide it a data source, and then it will actually create the tables and write the start time along with all the information about the app, how it started, along with how it terminated. And again, all this is configurable. And another thing that it does, it does several things, and you can take a look at the project, is that if I'm running my app in cluster 1 and it tries to start in cluster 2, maybe somebody accidentally kicked it off, the app, I can put a property saying single start, and what it will do is it's going to look and say if any other instance of this app is running anywhere in my framework, and if it is, it will say, whoa, somebody's running already, or I'm already running somewhere else, terminate. So that prevents that overlapping run that you may not want. So we've covered the tools. let's look at just a little bit of code here. So what does a Spring Batch app look like? In this case, we can see that I'm going to go ahead and bring this down, and you can see my first mistake. I said 5-step. This is a 3-step. You could tell when I wrote this, I was thinking 5 steps. So it's 3-step now. And in this case, what we can see is that I have my 3 steps. I have step 1, my prepping my records. Then I have step 2, and we can see that I'm going to do my calculating. But you also see I have this little ellipses here. The ellipses here is where we're going to inject our code that's going to cause it to blow up. Then we have our step 3, which is where we go in and we're going to write our results out. So very simple, very quick. Oh, that's kind of hard to see. But in Spring Cloud Tasks, so okay, that's how we're going to write our code to be restartable and also take advantage of all the tooling that Spring Batch provides. We can look at the next one, which is Spring Cloud Task. How can we set our application up to emit this data out there? So in this case, we're going to show you how I would like, if I want to have my app write these events out to a messaging framework. And in that case, again, we're going to create our add our dependency for our starter, which is Spring Cloud Starter Task. We're going to then provide the binder here, and it's going to be Spring Cloud Stream Binder. Rabbit, we're going to be, in this case, not writing to Kafka, we'll be writing to a AMQP instance, which is Rabbit. And then we're going to be adding our Spring Cloud Stream. With these 3 elements, I don't have to write any more code, or actually I do have to write one little piece of code. I have to add the add enable task to one of my to my configuration. Once I've applied this, every time the app starts and terminates, it's going to emit an event saying the task started and also say task ended. And in that end, it's going to provide all the information on how it ended, the error exception messages, the status, the exit code, all that stuff. It's going to put that there for us. And with that being said, let's go take a look at a little bit of code. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at a horrible screen. Ah! Oh my gosh, I didn't change the screen. How dare I let you see that? Man, what kind of world is it? I have to click this. Well, sooner or later we'll get there. Boop. There we go. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. This looks terribly familiar. This is the example I showed you in the on the slide deck. Again, this is a Spring Cloud Batch app, and we can see that I am starting with my step 1 start, and that we see that we're going to have obtaining a record. Again, I'm not doing the reads and writes in this case. We're just kind of showing you the steps that we want to be able to take to be for our application run and actually do the failure. So this is very, if you will, very loosely knit Spring Batch app, but it's a Spring Batch app nonetheless. Then we see that in our next step that we're going to be running, we see that we're doing our calculating, but then you also see where I have this little piece of code here that says, I want you to go out and I want you to go out and look at this table that I just created, task status, that's what I called it. And I want you to just get the count of it. If the count's greater than 0, I want you to throw an invalid entry exception, and we'll say, call it whoops, right? If the table's not there, we want to go ahead and say, whoops, no table. In the first case, we're going to be returning exit code 2. And then the other one, we're going to return exit code 3. And then we see in our third step, again, we're just going to be writing that result out of writing results, and that's just going to be the log. So in that case, the other thing you'll see in this piece of code, Spring Boot provides us a way in which we can set our exit code for our Java application, and we can see that it's going to return 0 if it's successful, or 2 or 3, based on whatever we like to show. So with that being said, let's continue, and we will actually go demo it. All right. So what we're going to do is I am going to set this up to fail. And then we're going to, actually I need to do a full clean. I want to make sure we're going to fail properly. Come on. And then we're going to do that. So now we're going to actually go and run our application that you just saw. And what it should do is fail horribly. Oh, come fail horribly. There we go. It failed horribly. Yay. But did it fail the way that I wanted it to fail? The answer is yes. So what we can see here is that we have exit. We see that we had the step 1 was successful. We see that step 2 was running, but encountered an error executing. And we see that it had, whoops, no table. What did I do? See, that's not what I wanted to see, right? Let's see, Docker PS. Or, oh my goodness gracious. Excuse me, didn't set up the environment. You know, that's what happens in demo world. Let's see, where did I set up my notes? There we go. I didn't set up my database properties. Shame on me. Okay.
Just restart the Docker container. You'll be fine.
That solves all the world's problems, in my opinion. All right, let's try that again.
It used to be reboot your computer. Now it's restart the Docker container.
Hey, did you see the first thing I did? I did a Docker PS. Where is it? So this time it actually failed properly. Come on, I know it's here. Come on, you can show yourself. There we go. We're getting there. All right, we see that again, 1, 2. But in this case, we see, whoops, this is the one I wanted to see. And I didn't have to start my Docker container. I just had to fix my app or fix my properties. Oops, there we go. So in that case, yay, we got the error accepted. But this is the first part of the thing we want to see is we want to go in now and say, all right, what if I go in and I want my app to pick up where it left off? So let's say I know how to fix my problem. And I know, oh, that table's got data in it. It's not supposed to have data in it. Let's reset it. Okay. In that case, I reset the data in that table. I rerun. And it should pick up where it left off. There we go. We were successful. And we can see that it skipped step 1. It picked up and ran step 2. And then it's going to finish with step 3. So we've handled that first criteria, right, of the application. And we can do a quick sneak over here. I'm going to go off script as I'm not supposed to. And see if I can find data flow. There we go. And I should have written 2 records out to the database. One that says the app started, the up that the app completed. And I can kind of take a peek at that table. There's a project out there called Spring Cloud Dataflow. We'll talk a little bit more about it in a second. That allows me to orchestrate the launching of streams and tasks. In that case, we're just going to use this real quick to take a look at that table. And we can see that we actually did have a launch of my first app. We see that return to exit code 2. And then we can see that where I relaunched it again, and we got the exit code 0. So just kind of a little show there. So with that, we're going to go back to our presentation. I'm going to play from the current slide. So we could say restartability check. We could say that we notified somebody that the status of the run. And I should also showed you in Rabbit, you'll see two entries in that table. In that queue that says, hey, I emitted 2 messages, but let's keep going. So we actually did the first part. We did the restartability, both parts. One, we notified somebody, and then secondly, we actually wrote the we actually did a restart and picked up where we left off at. And the code I had to write was really just, if you will, the code that I wanted to write. I focused on the business problem, not on the messaging, not on the database, none of that. It was done for me. The other part that we want to look at is how can I automate that step that I did in the middle where I had to go in and see that it failed, reset the environment, do the fix, and then rerun it instead of me having to do it manually. I want to have a system that could capture that problem. I also want that system to filter out non-problems, meaning if it starts, okay, fine. If it was successful, fine, I don't care. But if it did have a problem, I want you to attempt to resolve the problem, and then I want you to restart that that failed app. We're going to be talking about 2 different ways to do that. One, we're going to use we're going to use a stream to handle that. And then the other, we're going to use a workflow engine to handle that for us. So we're going to actually give you 2. There's a lot of stuff we're covering tonight. So the first is the stream. And what we want to do is actually, like we did before, I'm going to re-execute my build run from the command line. Why? Because I like command lines. But then what we also want it to do is like what we're going to show you is we want it to write write out that it started to a topic and that it terminated to a topic. Pardon me there. And then what we wanted to be able to do is filter out the starts and successes, we don't care. But what we want to do, if there's a problem, we want to fix that problem. And if we fix that problem or not, let's say we fix the problem, we want to send that data to a router. And what that router says, hey, there was a problem, they fixed it, I want to relaunch that app, and I want to do so automatically, right? But if I couldn't resolve the problem, I want to send that out to a notifier, right? And so that somebody can work via Slack or whatever to say that hey, there was a problem, the system was not able to handle it. What do we want? Please take action. In this case, you're going to say, well, that's a lot of code, Glenn. Well, what if I said this? What if I could just for here write a function to solve that problem and not have to write the messaging code? I apologize. Long day on meetings today. But then this router and this launcher, what if I said they were already created? Let's say what if I say there's already a project that Spring provides that will provide a foundation of apps that you commonly would see in streams, and that you could take these and pull them down, build them, and use them without having to write the code yourself. And that's what we're going to show you. Okay, so let's do some buzzword bingo real quick. So the filter and fix, I'm going to use Spring Cloud Stream to write that, okay? And then we're going to use the existing apps that are already there, the router and the task launcher, right? We're going to use that directly from the Spring Cloud Stream apps. If you look down here, you'll see the links to the projects. And then lastly, we're going to orchestrate that using Spring Cloud Data Flow. Again, I'm going to show you what the lookup, a basic understanding of how to hook up stuff using streams, but then I'm going to show you like the really super easy way to use Spring Cloud Data Flow to orchestrate that. So with that, it's time to show a little bit of code. All right. So let's take a look at the application, that filter and fix that I showed you. Let's zoom in on that a little bit. There we go. And what we're going to do is you'll see that this is a function. It's taking a string and returning a string. Or it's a parameter of string and returns a string. And in this case, I just have this function. And what it's going to do is the following. It's going to take the data that Spring Cloud Task gave me, and it's going to say, I want you to get the task name from that JSON, and then store that away. And then I want you to take and look and see if the payload that's in there contains an exit code of 2 or 3. And then what I want to do is not a 3, just 2. If it has a 2, then what I want you to do is I want you to truncate that table, and then I want you to send and prep a message to send down to the task launcher, hey, that I have I want you to launch a task with the name of whatever the task name is. Okay, with that being said, let's go. Oh yeah, I wanted to show you this too. Sorry, I get so excited. So what we want to do is you say, okay, Glenn, that's not a lot of code. How much code did you have to write to do that? That was it. And what we can take a look at is, what did I have to add for my dependencies? Again, I created a Spring Cloud Stream, and I said, what messaging system am I going to be using for my demo? And I'm going to use Rabbit again. But if I didn't, I wanted to use Kafka, I could have wrote it. I could have just said Kafka. And you're like, okay, you've created the function. All right, this stuff is going to magically somehow connect to the database. To the messaging system. How do you know what exchange you're going to listen to and write to? How are you going to how would you configure that, right? And then we look at, I could do those via properties. And in this case, I'm doing it in a YAML file that I include with the project, but you can overload this, of course, again, via properties. And we could see that I was pretty basic. I call this a transform. I'm not that ingenuitive. I should have called it filter and fix, but I called it transform in that case. But we can see that the function transform, and then we can say the input that I want to be taking that data in from is going to be a exchange or topic of input. And then once I do process that data, I want to send, again, for a transform, I wanted to write it to output. I want to write it to the output topic. And we could see, I think that was it. Was there anything else I wanted to show? Oh, yes. And you're going to say, how does it filter? How do we filter out the starts and the exits that were successful? Notice that in this payload, I said payload contains. And if it does, we're going to set result to a value. That's going to send that message along. However, if it doesn't have an exit code of 2, what's going to happen is that result be null, and Spring Cloud Stream will look at that result and say, oh, that's null. Don't pass that along, stop. So if you will, this method is filtering out the stuff we don't care about, only acting on the stuff we want to, and then only send the messages we want to send downstream. So what does that look like? So now I've got, we're going to reuse the components that are there, and I've created my own component. Let's go create a stream. Now, mind you, I could do this I could do a Java jar on this project and just launch it like you saw there. I could go in and set the environment for the task launcher that I'm going to be using and launch it. And that's okay. I can certainly do it that way. But let's find a more elegant way to do that. Let's use Spring Cloud Dataflow to do that for us. So in that case, I'm going to go back. And what we're going to do is, first thing we're going to show you real quick, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Woohoo, zoom in. Is in Spring Cloud Dataflow is going to actually launch a real application. It's really going to launch a real jar file for you. So in that case, what we're going to do is we're going to look for, actually, we want to look for sources, or actually processors. And you're going to see that I have a filter and fix processor here. And we'll see that it actually goes to the application that I just built, right? Or I just didn't build. I built it earlier today, right? So we can see that it goes to that app that I built. So now Dataflow knows that there's going to be a filter and fix processor that I can use. Okay, so let's create a stream. What does that stream look like? So the first thing I do know is this. I know that I said that I wanted my input to my stream to be coming from input, but that's not exactly true, because by default, Spring Cloud Task, anytime it has a task, by default, it's going to write all those messages to a stream or to a topic or exchange called task executions. But again, in Spring Cloud Task, I can change that. I'm just using their default. So now I want to take anything that comes from task executions. Oh, sorry, not task executions. Task events. Task events. And then what I want to do is I want to put it to my filter and fix application that I have, or processor that I wrote. And then I want to send it to the task launcher. Now, the thing is to keep in mind is that the task launcher is a part of Spring Cloud or Spring Stream apps. And that Spring Stream apps, keep in mind, already exists. I built it and I utilize it, and I've already registered it. So it is available to us. So in order for me to prevent me from making a 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock mess up on typing, as you saw me do earlier, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I'm going to just do a copy and paste. And then what I'm doing is this filter and fix. I'm applying the command line args that I want to connect to the database. Remember, our filter and fix is actually going to clean out that table. So I need to set up the properties for it to use. So I'm going to create the stream definition. I'm going to call it filter and fix. And I'm going to create that stream. Now, I created the definition. Now I want to deploy this. Spring Cloud Dataflow can deploy this to my local environment, to a Linux machine. It can also deploy it to Cloud Foundry or to Kubernetes. And also keep in mind, when it deploys those out there, we can, the images I can use, you saw where I was using file, I can use a file system. I can register my apps via as files, as Maven dependencies, as Docker images, all that. So in this case, since this is all running locally on my machine, I'm using a mixture of both Maven dependencies for the task launcher and the filtered fixes for my file. Also note that I'm not doing the deployer portion, or sorry, the router portion, because of time. And so we're just doing a really simple solution here. So I'm going to deploy that stream. And as we deploy, we can see that it's showing the word deploying. And I can refresh every once in a while to see if it's fully deployed and launched. Now, from data flow, what I can also do is, as I update and enhance my filter and fix processor, I can add versions to it. And as I add register those versions, like I showed you here in the applications, I can have multiple versions. And then I can tell this stream which version I want to use. So I have the chance to upgrade or roll back and do so live. So that's part of the features that it offers. And we can also see that now, and zoom in, we can see that it's now deployed. So now we have a stream out there that's going to be listening for the task events. Whoops, there we go. And there we go. So now let's retry our demo here. And first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a full clean. And we're going to do a setup fail. And we're going to go ahead and do the launch again. Now this again should fail horribly. And fail horribly the correct way. And I shouldn't have to restart my Docker image, right, Pratik? So let's see, let's go back, find it, blah, blah, blah. Okay, it's here. I know the error is here. Come on, error. Show yourself. There we go. And we see that step 1, step 2, and we see that there's a valid task execution. Whoops. But what I want to see now is I want to see my app restart. Okay. And we're going to go to workflow mix. Or actually, no. We want to go here. Sorry. Springcloud data flow. There we go. And we want to go see the task executions. Oh, crap. It already finished. Darn it. Okay. Well, what we can see is that this is where it failed. This is when I launched and failed. But we also see right now that it actually restarted that app. And we could go in and see that what time it started. So let's go view the log. I'll probably have it here. So we can see at 1947, which is less than a minute ago, we can see that it restarted it. And more importantly, we could scroll down and see that we had 2 and 3, and it picked up where it left off. So what did we just do? We showed in how we could create a simple Spring Batch application, launch it, have it fail, restart it, have it pick up where it left off, have a task send out notifications in the way that we want via event messaging, in this case Rabbit, or it could be Kafka, also write it out to a database. We created a stream that can receive these events, attempt to do a cleanup, and then clean up and then restart the app, and then we can see where the app picked up where it left off at. Now, that's not it. I promised you a workflow engine, didn't I? So let's go take a look. Let's go back to our presentation. Somewhere. There we go. Ah, there you are. And we'll play for the current slide. So we just went and saw Spring Cloud Stream. We created an app. The app was what? Just a function with some dependencies. And I used Spring Cloud Data Flow to tell us what entry points I wanted that to have, or what topic it was going to read from, and what topic it was going to write to or exchange. In this case, exchange, since it was Rabbit. We also use Spring Cloud Stream Apps to provide what the task launcher that we were going to use. We use Spring Cloud Data Flow to help us orchestrate that. Again, I could have done that from the command line, but in this case, I use just Data Flow to do that for us. Then, what about now? You say, well, streams are fine, but I really don't want to use my Kafka instance or my Rabbit instance to do that. What else is out there? Well, there are several workflow engines out there that will be able to use allow you to design a DAG, if you will. And so with that, what I could do is, a directed graph. And so I could create a directed graph that allows me to say, I want this workflow engine to follow my directed graph. I want it to launch my build run. And if the build run is failed, I want it to call another routine that maybe will go fix the problem or will fix the problem. And then I want my workflow engine to rerun that build run demo. And I want it to do it successfully. Well, I chose for tonight's discussion to use Argo. And you'll also see that Argo is a workflow engine that is a container native workflow engine for orchestrating jobs in Kubernetes. Nowadays, I don't think you can have a Java application discussion without saying Kubernetes. If you don't get the checkbox. So I can actually, hold on, let me write that checkbox by the Kubernetes. All right, there we go. I've just made that checkbox. I got to make sure I say Kubernetes at least once. I think I've said 7 times. There you go. But in this case, if you're doing it locally, or in Linux, I will be writing some code in Spring Cloud Dataflow and Compose Task Runner that will offer the same support. We already have Compose Task Runner, which is a workflow engine in Dataflow, but it's not available yet. But I wanted to show you these wonderful features, and I said, you know what? Let's just go into Argo and show it in Argo. And Argo is already up and available on Kubernetes. So what does Argo, how do I tell Argo what to go do? So Argo, again, is going to be deployed to your Kubernetes instance. And what you will do is you can go in and create these templates. And what these templates allow you to do is to describe sections of what you want a particular action to be, what resources you're going to use. And then you will assemble these templates together into a workflow. So let's take a look at a simplified workflow. Okay, in our workflow, before I go show you the workflow, I need to tell you the other components. Sorry. So what are the components that we're going to be using as part of our workflow, right? In this case, we're going to have our same build run app, the same build run app I just ran, but I Dockerized it, right? Because this is going to be in Kubernetes. So I created a container for it, but I used Spring Boot's build image now. So instead of me having to go grab a jib or to use my own Docker file, I can use the build image from Spring Boot. So, and you don't have to do any real new additions. You just use the plugin that's there. And what you'll do is you can just do a Maven W Spring Boot build image, and he'll create a Dockerized image of your Spring Boot app. The advantage is also creates a build pack for it, which allows your app to run, your Java boot app to run in an optimal way. I'm not going to go too much more into that, but you can certainly read the documentation on that. It's pretty cool. It saves me a little time when I'm creating my project. And then we are going to introduce a new app called Workflow Fix. And this Workflow Fix is going to look just like what we had before with the filter fix that we had for that Spring Cloud stream. And it's also being Dockerized using the Spring Boot image. So what does all this code look like? Well, let's go there real quick. So we're going to go to Workflow Fix first. And we're going to see that it is a Spring Boot app. It is not a Spring Batch app, but I've added the @enable task here because I want it to record when it gets launched that it actually existed. Again, this is just a Spring Boot app using application runner. And in this case, what it's going to do is kind of blindly just go in and truncate that table because we're going to build the logic in our workflow to say when this should be launched or not. So let's take a look at that workflow. So this is what a workflow template will look like from Argo. Let me zoom in here. So in that case, we're going to see that this is, again, a workflow engine. I know, YAML, isn't it exciting? Okay, I'm weird. Yeah, I know, I'm weird. So in that case, I don't get that excited about YAML. I know it's a feign. It's a feign. So let's keep going. In this case, we can have, we're going to, anytime Argo launches, we want to give a prefix so we know what our workflow name is. In this case, we're going to call it batch app exec. And then we're going to have a series of templates. And our entry point template is going to be called AJUG workflow, okay? And it's a simple DAG, and simple DAG is going to call template batch run, all right? Batch run is going to call 2 different containers that we have. The 2 containers, no surprise. One is the workflow fix, the one that I just demoed or just showed you, the one that just does the truncated table, and our batch test app. That's all that's there, right? So those are the 2 containers it's going to work on. So that batch run template is going to do this. The first thing it's going to do is it's going to run the batch app. And then you notice it says continue on failed. We know our app is going to fail. By default, when we're using steps like this in Argo, if you get anything other than a 0, it's going to consider failure and stop that workflow. In this case, we're saying, we'll take care of it, don't you worry. So we said, continue on failure. And then what we want to do is, if it does fail, meaning if the exit code returned back from our batch app is 2, we want to run the fix failed batch app. If you look at Argo, Argo has a wonderful set of parameters that you can take and extract from the previous run or executions. You can even have counters, things like that. You can look at files. It's got a really rich set of parameters you can take advantage of to make and determine how you want your workflow to go through. And with that being said, let's say in our first case, it's going to do the see that the exit code is 2, and then it's going to call the fix failed batch app, which in turn does nothing more than this: calls our workflow fix, and then immediately after calls template batch run, which we will go back and remember batch run is this. So we've created a cycle, a circle, right? And some people say, well, do you really want to have a DAG with a loop? It's up to you. I just kind of wanted to show that you could create a loop. You could create a control loop. You see where that if it's successful, it makes it out. Again, I can have a counter in here that says, hey, after 3 tries, that's stopped, don't do any more. You can certainly create that for it and be able to use that as a parameter. So now that we can see the template, let's take the next step. Okay, let's go to here. And actually, I recorded this. Yeah, I recorded this because if you've ever run Minikube, which is what I was doing my practice on with this, and Zoom, they don't get along that well, meaning one slows down the other. So I recorded this little piece right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and bring this from here, from the current slide. And I'm going to be using the Argo command line. And so from Argo, and basically just, I think it's just a quick brew install of Argo. And basically what you're going to do, there it goes, is I'm going to tell it I want to run that YAML file that I had. So I'm going to submit it. And we can see where it's actually going in and doing the batch run start. And as it's doing the batch run start, we see that it failed. And we can tell, it even tells us it failed with exit code 2. It's going to then go in and do the fix failed batch app. It's going to check, and it's going to see that it's gated at saying it, don't run me unless it's a 2. It sees that it's a 2. Then it's going to run the fix stable. We see that that was successful. Then it's going to do the batch retry. From the batch retry, it's going to rerun our batch app. Okay, and we can let it go cycle through, and we see it completes. And what's cool about this is this gives us this flow. They also have a UI you can use. I just like command lines, right? As if you couldn't tell. And what you can do in that case is you can go in and see where you actually launch the app. It noticed that it failed, allowed us to take that branch to solve the problem, and then again to relaunch it. And even each time you can look at the message and saying, hey, why didn't you run fix failed batch app again? Well, 0 didn't equal 2. So let us go back, and now we can actually do from here. Let's do this. We'll do Argo list, and it shows you all the previous executions that you had. So we can actually go look at that execution, Argo, and let me shrink that down here because we don't need that quite as much. And I'm going to say Argo logs, and I'm going to give it the execution. I apologize for the coloring it gave us. And I apologize if it's hard to read. I will highlight it because I know that it is very difficult to read. If I can find the failure location, there we go. And once again, we can see that in the first run, it actually failed. Again, invalid entry exception, whoops. We can then see that it actually launched the second routine. As if you can't tell, that's a second color there. I know some people have various types of color blindness. It's kind of difficult to see that with these colors, and I apologize for that. And then lastly, we can see in the third execution, it just ran steps 2 and 3. Now we can actually go back and say, okay, did task actually do its job? Did it actually record it? So the answer is yes. Let's go back to data flow here. And this is a data flow running in my Kubernetes instance. I could have used my local. I just thought about that. But we could go to the task executions. I can, through data flow, I can hook into multiple environments. I can hook it to a local and to Kubernetes all at the same time. It's pretty cool. And in this case, we can see that it ran all 3 steps. We can see that it did the task batch app. We can see that it did the workflow fix and the test batch app. So that's where, again, task allowed us to be able to record, and we could go to one location to be able to check whether that ran or not. All right, so what we want to do now is go back to our presentation, not to Twitter, no. Let's go to our app. Where did I put it? Right there. And we're going to go back to play from, well, we actually want to go to the next one. 1, 2. And we're going to do buzzword bingo. What did we learn today? This is a quick summary. That we can use Spring Batch to add the ability. My headset died. So in this case, we learned that Spring Batch allows us to not only to give us the readers and writers and give us a framework for and transaction support we need, but also gives us a baseline of restartability. We also see where Spring Cloud Task allows us to be able to record in one location the status of our app, regardless of where it runs, and gives us multiple options where it can send that data. We also saw where we can create solutions for restarting our apps using either streaming, and we saw how Spring Cloud Stream and Stream Apps can do that if we want to do it in a streaming method, but also we could see where we could take advantage of Argo, a workflow engine, to be able to create the logic if we want to have some complex structures for handling the launching and resolution of problems for our batch runs. With that being said, thank you, folks. That's the end of this presentation. You have questions, comments, laments, naps?
All right,
Docker
folks.
questions?
Some questions for Glenn. We don't want to let him off the hook too easy today. So
Oh, yes, you can.
questions.
You can let me off.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Hey, Greg.
Go ahead, Greg.
Hey, guys. Glenn, thanks for showing us that. Really cool. I think you're going to find there's a bunch of people on here that's using Spring Batch in real life and not to play.
Oh, there's a bunch.
So real cool. I think we were really psyched to look at your use case. And one of my questions, maybe not necessarily around restartability, but in real life, for example, your reader, we're going to pull a lot of data from a data source. And if you fail in the processor, for example, what are your tips maybe, or in real life, how have you handled those situations where you might be in a transaction and that whole transaction for that chunk fails? Right. When, that's been our pain point with, using Spring Batch. And I'll stop there.
No, I think that's a good question. I think in that case, you can store the location in the batch context of the last write that you had that was successful. And from that, you could say on the next run, when you start up your app, you get to step 2, you can say, okay, check the context. Where did we leave off at, right? And then say, okay, we ran to chunk 50, and we know that we were at record, whatever that chunk left off at, and pick up from there and begin that transaction process again.
Sure. Yeah, I think we have something similar. I'm going to leave the floor for other people, but I have one final question, and just curious how you guys are dealing with transactional context. Again, back to the whole chunking, you have, let's say you have a large chunk size of 1,000 records. Because of how Spring Batch works, you essentially have the database transaction opened up, and you pretty much blocked everything until that chunk size is complete.
It's complete, yes. Now,
so just curious how you've been working through those issues.
You mean, well, so in this question, it's not a fact of restartability. What you're asking is a question on how do I handle, I've got this big chunk and I'm blocking entries in that table. How do we handle, that big block being processed at that time? Is that the kind of the question I'm getting from you?
Yeah, the solution that we come to is make smaller make smaller chunk sizes. But I just don't feel like that's the right answer,
Right, and in that there's a couple of things you could. I mean, that's the one thing. The default answer is to make a smaller chunk size, but then again, you're going to pay a penalty for that, correct? And speed. And so
Yeah,
with that, what you also want to be able to think about, let me do this. That would be my stock answer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do this, and this is kind of wide open. Is I'm going to chew on my pen. That's how I'm going to solve this problem. Did you notice that?
I have a question sort of somewhat similar to that a little bit, but I work on a mainframe, so I'm sorry I'm a rookie Java guy.
Oh, no worries. Oh, by the way, real quick, Greg, I put my email. Ask that question. I'll see if I get you an answer. I put it in the chat. Okay, go ahead. No worries.
Okay, so however though, what we do in the mainframe, which is probably put pretty applicable on it, is you commit at certain chunks and you write it out to the log at the time in which you commit to. Mm-hmm. And then you restart based upon what you have already written out to the log on.
Right, and that's what we're doing with Spring Cloud Batch. Has what's called a context, and what happens is as you're processing the records, you're allowed to inject into that context, much like your log file, where we're at. Right, so you can data batch not only gives you that step level that it's going to give you, but you can inject specific information in the context for that step. So when that step is hit, you can say, okay, for example, like Scott said there, they're running in 1,000 entry chunks, right? Let's say at chunk 12, it chokes, right? We would enter into the context, we choked at chunk 12, so we know to skip chunks 1 through 11 when we're in that one step and pick up at chunk 12, much like that log that you are using on the mainframe.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, other questions?
Yeah, just out of clarification there, definitely understand the whole chunking idea, but the problem is within that chunk, so you say you're got 1,000 records and number 999
you'll roll back.
And the whole thing rolls back. That's nasty.
That is. And see, the thing is that's where you're going to have to adjust your sizes appropriately, because the reason you are chunking is to make sure of a couple of things. One is that you have that safe rollback, and you have to kind of gauge that. I don't want to go too much into your business case, and probably we could, but in that case, there's a roll off there that's like, okay, the smaller the chunk, the slower the speed, and then a larger chunk, you get better speed, but you get a more painful rollback. The other thing that I'm certainly ask me that, because I want to actually hit up one person I know that probably give me a more give you a better answer if that can be true. One question I got online, Greg, did that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
I think we get. Thank you.
Yeah. Let's just shoot me something. The other thing is can we get a link to the demo? Yes, I'm going to try to get that out Thursday. I want to just clean up the code and pop that up there. So I will. Here's what I'll do. I'll go into our meetup, and I will put in a link to the project. I'll tell you, I'll put a link out to the project on my GitHub repo that you can pull and play with. I'll include a PDF of the presentation, as well as the sample demos, and also the Argo template that I used.
And we'll share the recording as well. Glenn, we can package all together on a tweet. So
cool.
yet another
That's
reason
awesome.
for everybody to sign up to Twitter, because no, you're not. So you get stuff like that.
Free. Okay, cool. Any other questions? All right, folks. I hope I wasn't too confusing. I know that was a lot of material. That's the reason I kind of kept it a little bit light and fluffy in some areas, but I wanted to cover a lot of material because I wanted to show you the tools and the processes that you can think about to be able to restart your batch jobs and give you that intro into what various realms that you can get into. So I do appreciate y'all coming tonight, and thank you. Okay,
Thanks,
do we want
Glenn.
to? No worries. Do we want to have a chat time?
Conflab.
Conflab.
So I'm curious. I think I asked this question. Well, I didn't ask it last month, but as you know, we run the virtual Dev Nexus, and we've all been to virtual events. There's some this year, probably a lot last year. We were online all day long, webinars and trainings and blah, blah, blah. So what are y'all's feelings about having these virtual events? I don't mean just like a monthly Zoom meeting, because we're going to do that so we can all get together again. But, just generally, I'm sure you get, lots of comments about virtual this, virtual that, attend this, attend that. How's everyone feeling about these things now?
I've heard good feedback. Some people have said that they prefer it because they don't have to travel, don't have to take a day to travel and a day to come back. They can be with their family. They have.
I enjoy seeing people in person, but I probably would not have been allowed by my company to attend DevNexus this year if I had to pay the fee and attend in person. And I was also able to have a couple of remote members of my team from South America attend DevNexus when past years they've watched us go off to DevNexus while they had to stay at work. So there's definitely some advantages.
And I think virtual events are in some ways a lot more inclusive. Take the cost of the ticket aside, and we don't charge, relatively speaking, that much for ours, but a lot of the big companies, they charge like $1,500, $2,000 for these events, and that's steep. But even taking that out, I think without having to take the travel time and the travel expense, it does make virtual events a lot more inclusive. And I was frankly shocked by the number of it. DevNexus had almost 6,000 registrations, and half attend. It's like Meetup. If 100 people sign up, 50 people will attend, and that's pretty much exactly what happened this month, and happens every single month, whether it's live or in person, frankly. But I think that they're a lot more inclusive because, to your point, people from other parts of the world, or they may not have budget, or their company won't pay, can attend these things. If they're free, they're free, or if there's a nominal cost, or even half the price, whatever. It's a lot less expensive, put it that way. Although you do miss one of the biggest parts of going to an event, which is actually meeting people, like-minded people, and so on.
Yeah, I was going to say that's one of the downsides is, going to a conference and meeting people who have similar ideas or who have different ways of looking at things and learning from them. It's a nice byproduct of being in hallways and rooms with other folks. And I have yet to find anything that comes close virtually.
I think as a speaker also, while I'll tell you what, I'm very thankful for all the virtual conferences I've attended and spoke. But as a speaker, the one thing I love about having a audience that I can see is I get so much feedback from their expressions, their questions that they can ask. And it allows for my talk to be less rigid. Like in a talk I gave tonight, it was very rigid, very timed, very bam, 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 almost like a sales call. But when you're in an audience, when I can see you and I can see what you're talking about, I will actually adjust how I know Pratik does the same thing. You adjust how you're the talk that you're giving to emphasize, maybe like in this case, people were asking about, okay, what about the restartability and pain of that? Okay, while it's a little bit off topic, I could probably wind that into the talk and build more on that. So there are those times where I can adjust based on what I'm getting from you. And it's kind of difficult to do that when we have text over here, because I have to stop and read, right? And unfortunately, that's a monochromatic, but that's one of the things I love about in person. But what I love about, again, the virtual is, man, it's awesome to just, be able to reach more people and give them an opportunity that people you would never have a chance to do in the first place. So, I'm getting off my soapbox.
There's a lot has been said about hybrid events, where they're both online and in person. And I don't know if I'm a big fan of making the whole thing, like everything available hybrid, but I think that maybe doing something like making one of the tracks and the keynotes available as live streaming while the conference is going on. But, something like our event and others have many tracks. So you still want people to come because that we know that they get a lot out of it. But what about having something like that where you have your event and some of it is available in real time online?
I think that's a good call. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that sounds like a nice compromise. Those who are able to come can come and get those in-person benefits, and those people like overseas who can't make it then could still benefit from the content.
And it could be that you just pick 2 or 3 tracks to make it, like you said, 2 or 3 tracks that will be public to the stream, and then the rest are in person. So
I think one of the things that we're going to see is, and I'm really one of the things I'm concerned about is that when we do go back to in person, I think there's going to be such a excitement about that I feel that the virtual world, because people I think are so zoomed out, are going to is going to really get a second is really going to get a back seat. I think if we can keep in mind that something Vincent said about the importance of the inclusiveness of, there's still going to be people that have maybe health situations which will not be conducive to being in a large environment, whether it's so it might not be a financial or a geographical issue. I think that the organization, the conference like a DevNexus that can really come up and truly create as much as a hybrid event as possible, with taking into consideration the people that need to be virtual and can be on site, is really gonna knock it out of the park for the communities, for the technical community across the globe, because I think that's going to be what we need to see. Because either way, every community, whether it's in person or whether it's virtual, especially during a transition period, is going to need that. Is going to need that encouragement, as opposed to once the switch is turned back on and people can meet in person, for a whole part of the population to be left aside. So just something to consider, that while I think it's great that we could have some virtual tracks, I think that we should probably be thinking in terms of, let's make it all available to everybody, and work backwards from there based on what logistics are not possible. Because I think the one thing that we've learned through the whole COVID crisis is that virtual is possible. And until we've worked through all this, we wouldn't have made those efforts. I just would hate to see those efforts go down the tube, which gets turned back on.
One thing that I would comment on, because I've been a part of some events that are virtual and non-virtual at the same time, I think the hardest part is things like someone in the classroom asks a question to the person that's presenting, and that audio is usually not good for the virtual audience. So a lot of the interaction points that you have in person don't bode well for audio. So that's the thing that I think that would have to be worked on. But outside of that, I haven't seen many issues with the with the hybrid approach.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm only going to say this once, really short. I know I talked a lot before, but my daughter had a bat mitzvah this weekend, and it was like on Zoom. So there was like 12 people allowed in the auditorium, and the rest of the people, the majority of people, were all virtual. And there are very easy, there are setups that can be accomplished with fairly limited efforts, just based on our technological advancements to get that. So when somebody speaks on Zoom, they can be heard throughout the room with clarity. So it can be done. The question is, do we want to make sure that we want to make it accessible? Do we want to make it accessible?
I was referencing the opposite scenario where you're one of the people in the room and being heard throughout, like whatever auditorium or room you're in, to the people on the Zoom, right? Usually there's a mic on the person that's presenting, but that doesn't necessarily always happen with all the other people at the event. So,
well, a way around that, because the same happens in a live event, whereas one person asks a question at the back of the room and the speaker's intently focused on them, and most of the time they can hear them. But it's good speaker practice to then repeat the question, because you're right, the speaker has a mic. But that doesn't always happen, I know, because sometimes the speaker will just launch into answering that question and the other half of the room haven't even heard it. Yeah, I was, having done a few of these virtual events now, I love the inclusivity of them. I really do. I love seeing, when I looked at that map, I loved seeing people from, good Lord, all over the world that had registered. And I didn't do any analytics on who attended. I could actually do that, but you won't get all those people to come to an in-person event. It's just not logistically possible. So I think, as an organizer, you got to marry, building your audience that want to come and making things available to people everywhere else.
Hey, Vincent, that map actually shows only those who attended and did log in. So it could be really cool to overlay that with data from attendees of previous years and see how doing it virtual really did open up the geographic spread.
Well, we know it's predominantly North America. I mean, there's a handful that come from Europe and South America, but it's going to be predominantly 97% North America.
Sure.
Yeah, and also I think all these conference platforms, and there's so many now, and even the ones that were around last year are so much more mature and feature rich because there's been so much demand in the last 12 months, and there will be for the next 6 months, I think, that doing these things hybrid in any way, shape, or form, no matter what you share, is going to enhance that experience for attendees that can't make it. And make it easier for organizers to do, frankly.
I think one of the things that also it brought out was it reintroduced conferences to the beginners, where it was very difficult for companies to send a beginner, somebody who may not know basic Kubernetes, basic Spring, basic Quarkus, right? To send them to another city to go take to go to a conference, because that person didn't know the material. They would go in and be lost. And a lot of many of the conferences, they had like a beginner's track, right? And so those are some of the most well-attended tracks out there, was because there's a ton of beginners out there. And so it gave opportunity to people to actually, again, that diversity of the new folks wanting to come in and do Java. So that's one of the things that was exciting to see. And one of the things I hope we can continue going forward is having like a beginner track.
Well, that begs a question. And, for the JUG here, it's something that we always discuss in board meetings. What should the program look like for the year? And, try as we might, I'd like to try and plan it all out well in advance, but it's not usually as in advance as we would all like. But there's got to be a balance between introducing people to new things like Project Stargate, next month, and what Glenn talked about tonight. So, we always think, what do people want to hear about? It's not always just the newest and coolest cloud native thing. It's sometimes people just want to hear about unit testing. Get back to basics with an expert on. I was thinking about, should we do a thing on design patterns? When's the last time we did a session on design patterns? The Gang of Four or whatever. So what are your thoughts on something like that? On that kind of mix of fundamentals of software development. And specifically in Java, and kind of the latest and greatest new thing.
Yeah, finding a balance on that is hard. People want to see new stuff, but beginners need basic information.
Well, I also don't think it's just beginners though. I think it's people that not everybody uses these cutting edge, leading edge, or newer technologies in their day-to-day job, and most folks are just faced with basic problems, and sometimes those things get forgotten. The fundamentals get forgotten, and it would be great to have an expert just remind you, if you will. Again, I'm just interested in people's thoughts, because
I agree. What's bread and butter talks is what we used to call them, right? And we, wanted, some of the, not trying to get specific on any conference, but one of the highest attended talks was just intro to X. And it was just for people who are just getting started. And so bread and butter talks, I think there is a room for that, because not everybody knows a particular software package, right? And they just need that one person. Also, it shows that we care about, as the speakers and as the teachers, that we care about those folks, right? We're not just saying, go watch this video somewhere, right? We're spending time to actually teach them, and teach them live, which is meaningful, I think.
So what are some of the kind of fundamentals? I mean, you all, ladies and gents, you're our community. What do you think are the kind of fundamentals that would be helpful to you to do a refresher on in your day jobs?
Yeah, one thing that you just hit on was like testing and things. And as a person that's been in the industry for a while, I see tons and tons of engineers that struggle with that, and just understanding how to properly write unit integration or higher level tests. So I think it's definitely a spot that has been a little bit left alone. I don't know how you make that exciting. So I don't know how, like on the invite, what you can say to get a lot of people riled up to see, hey, come check out unit testing. But it's something that's deeply needed within the industry for sure.
Right. That raises a great point, Raymond. And I think that I personally, as a board member, if 5 people come to the unit testing talk and get a whole bunch of benefit out of it because they need to hear it, that's fine with me.
True. I think Raymond, you have a good point. One thing that we could do that would draw a lot of people is do testing on Kubernetes. So I'm only half joking. I think a lot of people, especially in this new cloud world, don't really have a good handle on how to do kind of basic testing for, CI/CD and think when was it y'all that we carried JUnit talk? Was it last year or the year before? I can't remember.
I think it was last year.
Did we do
in the start of the year?
It was last year. Yeah.
I'll take a look.
We routinely try to mix in some fundamentals like JUnit into the mix, but you're right. It's trying to get something that's topical and also useful, and like people are like, oh yeah, that sounds like something I need, is definitely a balance, right?
Yeah, for me, I joined this talk specifically for Spring Batch, and Glenn's presentation was great, but he only had an hour and a couple of minutes to give, in my mind, with requires about 5 hours worth of deep discussion. I mean, the business use case that he brought up is exactly our business use case. So, you know, I was super excited about it, but I feel, you know, I don't have enough time to start talking about the real world issues that we're having. You know, Spring provides a lot of these other auxiliary pieces for you, but I don't have problems with those. I want to at least talk about, am I actually doing the right thing? And this is just the nature of Spring, and that's it. There is no solution to, you know, rolling back a chunk that has 1,000 transactions. There's no solution for this. It's just you're stuck. But I think there's not enough time to talk through those type of things.
And I think that's the one thing I miss about having a live conference too, is the ability to saying, you know, hey, you know, I answer all the questions as a speaker, then you and I go off and sit at a table out in the mix area, and we just go do napkin paper designs and discussions, right? And that's the thing I loved about in-person conferences. I'm not limited to text. We can just sit down in person and do. I mean, personally, that's one thing I love about conferences is questions like that. I'm like, hey, come see me after. Let's go walk it. You know, let's go sit at a table and walk and do it. And I usually set office hours for that kind of stuff when I'm at a conference. So now I can give you my email, which is good, but it's not the same.
Yeah, the ability to have parallel conversations live, right? So, like, it wouldn't be conducive to this type of environment because everyone could only listen to you to talk. But like you're saying, when the live events happen, everybody would go out into the parking lot afterwards. You could have lots and lots of conversations. And I'm not dishing on the virtual thing. I think, you know, of course, it's responsible to be this way. But yeah, I do think that there were advantages that we don't have access to anymore, and we got to figure out ways to recreate those. Sure.
You know, Glenn, maybe is there a half-day workshop you think you could do on this subject?
Oh yeah. I mean, you know, that's part of it is I wouldn't mind doing a spring batch workshop, soup to nuts, right? And
yeah, sorry, Glenn. I don't get me wrong.
Go ahead.
We've been doing Spring Batch for many years now, and I feel we have a really deep understanding, and you know, we've got Stack Overflow and things like that. But it's when you have commiseration and with people who are actually face to face, you know, and you can say, so okay, you're having the same issue. There's really you've done the best you could given the overall architecture and technology that's out there. This is just an issue that we have to deal with. I think that's where I'm getting at is
right. I think part of it is also
Stack Overflow.
I think part of it is, Greg, as well, is that when you and I are talking in person, we can talk really frank. Right now I'm in front of 26 people, right? And I want to ask you some detailed questions, right? And I don't feel comfortable talking to you in front of 26 people. But one-on-one, it's more comfortable to talk and say, okay, you know, what kind of your restrictions? What's your business problem? And that's what's really good to focus down in a one-on-one, person-to-person kind of thing, right? And you know, but like teaching a 3-hour class or 4-hour class, I can do that. That's for the beginners. But your question is specific to yours. It might be valuable for other people to listen. And I've actually done that, like at Spring One and at DevNexus, where I'm like, come, let's go talk. And somebody said, can I join you? So he doesn't mind or she doesn't mind. Let's go talk, right? So, and I love those things. I even pulled in my boss from time to time online saying, he's got a good question here and I don't have an answer. Well, let's go talk about it. I've done that. So,
you know, I've often thought with, you know, we've talked about the hallway track at conferences a lot, but I often think that those kind of conversations that you have, as valuable as the content is that you go to the conference for, sometimes the most beneficial thing that can come out of your attending the event is those two conversations that you had throughout the 2 days with somebody about your real world use case and their experience.
All right, so real quick, as we're winding up here, the poll results are in, and almost everybody voted. Actually, everybody voted. Thanks everybody for voting. We have, the question was, when should the Atlanta Java user group meet in person this year? 17% said June, 12% said July, 5% said August. Obviously, everyone's taking August off for vacation. And then 31% said September, and then 36% said October. So it looks like we should start looking, hopefully, at maybe doing something in September for a September meeting. Yeah, so there you go. That's the poll results. Hopefully everything goes well and we'll be able to do that in coming up to September. You know, if everyone's not busy being on vacation. So if you're like,
yeah,
I'm saving my
hopefully
vacation for when everything opens up, right?
I mean, hopefully, because you know, the amount of vaccine won't be an issue for people that want that. By, you know, a couple of months from now, the logistics of getting everybody sorted out will be an issue. But, you know, hopefully by, as you said, by September, October, we'll be there.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, does anybody else have anything that they wish to discuss or bring up a topic, or you know, anyone played around with Java 16 that was released today, for example? I know you did, Glenn.
I actually
your demo-
did, but not. I did download it today. I had the one from last week, so I'm a week behind.
I was
Shame
gonna say
on me.
all your demos were in Java 16 today, right?
No, Java 11. Sorry. Shame on
Java
Glenn.
11.
Shame on Glenn.
Oh, that's so 2017,
LTR.
Glenn. Come
I
on.
know. You know, it's like Docker. Come on, man. Just reboot it all. Just
That's
kill
right.
it.
Just reboot it all. So. Well, all right, folks. Thanks everyone for joining. Vince, what's next one's topic? It's like a little late in the evening for me, so I don't remember anything
Stargate
right now.
Project Stargate.
That's right.
Yeah.
Stargate. So that's the Kubernetes, Cassandra, and DataStax thing, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, awesome. So
well, then maybe we should just do unit testing instead.
Well,
actually,
we could dial,
we did it.
We could dial up some lightning talks for later this year. Around testing.
We could. We didn't actually have the JUnit talk, Pratik. We talked about it, and it was on like the potentials for the year, but we never actually we didn't get instructor or something.
I think we may have done it in 2019 then. I do seem to remember in recent history we did do a JUnit talk. But
we did a TDD talk.
We did a
TDD
talk. That's right. That's
I don't talk a lot about JUnit because I like Spock better, but you know.
I think your image says a lot, my friend.
There you go.
Well, you know. No,
but that's
honestly,
evil
though,
Spock.
I find it so much. Yeah, that's the mirror Spock. Not necessarily evil, but in the wrong universe. But yeah, no, I find Spock is a better tool just in general because you can do more types of testing with it. It's got mocking and all that stuff built into it, so there's less libraries to learn, and it helps you not cut and copy or copy and paste live code into your test or vice versa. So it works out nicely. But if you want a JUnit talk, I can try and work on one of those.
And also, don't forget, everyone here, if you want to talk about something, let us know, please.
Absolutely.
You know,
it's something that you could teach us.
I think people sometimes think that, oh, I've got to be an expert in this. No, you don't. Okay, you just have to be passionate about it and can share whatever your real world use case is, if you're allowed to share, because that benefits everyone. And this is how people, I think we've talked about this before. I know lots of people who are invited to conferences all over the world now that 2-3 years previously did their first talk at AJUG. So, you know, this is the best place in the world to practice. And if anybody wants to do it and wants some help with how to, you know, craft the presentation and how to, you know, best practices for doing slides and things like that, let us know. Info@ajug.org. Any one of us be glad to help you out.
And keep in mind, you don't have to do a full hour presentation. If you want to do a lightning talk on something that you've learned, that's awesome.
Yep.
So please,
Yeah,
lightning talks.
that's actually a good point. That's actually a good point, Glenn. Maybe something that we can do to encourage folks to dip their toe in the water, as it is, to give a short 10 or 15-minute lightning talk. And what we do is we either fold that into the beginning of the next presentation or a presentation later this year, or we will just do an entire Atlanta JUG meeting with just like 3 or 4 lightning talks, so that folks in the community can put together a few slides, put together some demo code, and just try the presenting thing, and just for 10-15 minutes and see how it goes. All right, folks, if there's nothing else, I think we're gonna wind up the meeting for this evening. Thanks everyone for coming. We'll see you next
Thanks,
month
folks.
for
Take
next
care.
month's meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.